All right, so moving on to the next segment, I'll be sharing my fight prediction for the UFC 307 co-main event between Raquel Pennington and Julia Pena. So Raquel Pennington will be defending her bantamweight championship against Julianna Pena in the co-main event of UFC 307. So these are for my following storylines heading into this fight, heading into this co-main event fight between these two respective bantamweight fighters. So storyline number one is Raquel Pennington ready for her first bantamweight title defense. Raquel Pennington has been on a long quest, a long journey in her UFC career to be a champion. And she finally became a champion earlier this year where she captured the bantamweight championship in the co-main event at UFC 297, defeating Mayra Silva by unanimous decision. It's been a long road, a long trip for her to be champion. Now we're going to see how Raquel Pennington in her first title defense responds to being the hunted instead of the hunter in her first title defense at this bantamweight division. Now, nextly, it starts with the challenger for my next storyline. Will inactivity catch up to Julianna Pena? Julianna Pena is one hell of a fighter, as well documented. She's a former bantamweight champion. However, she has not been in the octagon for the last 26 months. The last time we saw her when she lost against Amanda Nunes in the second fight between the two respective women. It's unfortunate that we never got a trilogy between the two respective women. But her last fight, we did see her lose to Amanda Nunes in 2022. And she's had several fights canceled for several reasons. And a bad fact for you guys, 4 fights have been canceled for Julianna Pena since 2020. So, man, this fighter, Julianna Pena, is one hell of a fighter, but inactivity is a huge storyline heading into this fight. And even the champion, Raquel Pennington, has admitted in some interviews that she was preparing to fight Kayla Harrison just in case Julianna Pena was injured or pulled out of the co-main event of UFC 307. Of course, Kayla Harrison just came into the UFC not too long ago, and she is featured to be on this UFC 307 card as well. So she was preparing to fight Kayla Harrison as well in camp, just in case if Julianna Pena wasn't ready to go. But I think inactivity is going to be a huge storyline. It's something to look out for this co-main event and for UFC 307. Now, last but not least, the final storyline between these two respective women is their well-documented history that they have in The Ultimate Fighter. When these two respective women were a part of The Ultimate Fighter 10 years ago, where Julianna Pena became the first woman in UFC history to win Ultimate Fighter, both fighters were talking a lot of trash. Things got personal between the two respective women, and that's well documented. Julianna Pena, obviously, like I just said, went on to become the first woman to win Ultimate Fighter. And Raquel Pennington was eliminated during the Ultimate Fighter. But these two respective women, I'm really surprised that Dana White and the rest of the UFC executives never really matched these two women ever to actually fight each other in the octagon. And this is actually really surprising that this is going to be the first time that these two respective women lock horns in the octagon. So I'm going to be curious if this bad blood from years and years ago boils over to the octagon. And it's going to be interesting to see also how the face-offs go and the weigh-ins go between these two respective fighters in the final press conference for UFC 307 if the trash talking continues or the bad blood continues between these two respective fighters. But enough of the storylines. Let's get into the tail of the tape here. My tail of the tape, you have Julianna Pena. Julianna Pena has 12 victories, 5 losses to her resume. Has 3 victories come away of knockout, 6 victories come away of submission. Currently the #1 ranked contender in the bantamweight division. Stands at 5'6" and has a reach advantage of 69 inches. Then I'm looking at the champion, Raquel Pennington. Raquel Pennington has 16 victories, 9 losses to her resume. She has 1 KO victory, 4 submission victories. Currently the reigning defending bantamweight champion. Currently stands at 5'7" and has a reach advantage of 67 inches. So I'm looking at this, the height and the reach advantage, or actually, excuse me, the height advantage goes to the champion, Raquel Pennington, but the reach advantage goes to the challenger and Julianna Pena. We're going to see how that plays out for this fight this weekend. So these are my following game plans for these two respective women to follow if they want to walk out of Utah with that bantamweight title in the women's division for UFC. So Let's start off with the challenger here, Julianna Pena. I think Julianna Pena is going to have to win the striking exchange. Now, there's no secret that this fight could either be standing up or go on the ground. It could be a hot potato toss of how this goes, because both respective women are comfortable striking, in my opinion. Both respective women are comfortable grappling, in my opinion. But I feel like if Julianna Pena can land her right hand and the hooks and win the striking exchange, she can fight fire with fire in the pocket. This could be her game and her bread and butter and her key to success, to reclaiming that bantamweight championship. And this makes me go back and think about the big back and forth exchange between Amanda Nunes and Julianna Pena in their first fight, where it was back and forth, the striking combinations, both respective women fighters landing bombs in the pocket, exchanging, laying it all out in the octagon. And that led to Amanda Nunes tiring out, and actually Julianna Pena getting on her back and choking her out, getting the submission victory for Julianna Pena to become the bantamweight champion. Could I see a similar situation here? Yes. Because if Raquel Pennington isn't careful and she loses the striking exchange and Julianna Pena could tire her out and possibly get her to the ground and quickly get a submission victory, I could see this happening all over again, just like I did in late 2021 when I seen this. So I think winning the striking exchange is going to be a key ingredient to Julianna Pena possibly winning the bantamweight championship. Now, nextly, the ground and pound. And I think it's going to be important for Julianna Pena at this fight that goes on the ground to get control on the ground, whether it's side control or mount control. That's going to be a huge key ingredient for Julianna Pena to possibly reclaim this bantamweight championship. Landing significant strikes in the mount on Raquel, on top of Raquel, and gaining control of the fight. This is how Julianna Pena likes to control the pace of the fight, when she's on control in the mount, side control, or on top, landing significant strikes, tiring out her opponent, beating them down, and that's her way of winning fights. I mean, she's really good at it, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's a game plan. Last but not least, I think Julianna Pena is going to have to shoot for a lot of takedowns in this fight. And this stat right here, she actually has a 55.17% takedown accuracy. So that's going to be very important. Again, she is a really good grappler and a good wrestler. She has 6 victories coming away of submission and could frustrate Raquel Pennington on the ground with a wrestling background. So everything I just said, the striking exchange, the ground control, and the mount on side control on top, shooting for takedowns, and then going to the ground, this could be a good way for Julianna Pena to defeat Raquel Pennington. We're going to see how she does in that octagon. But let's go to the champion here, and Raquel Pennington. I think Raquel Pennington, her game plan number 1, I think it's going to be important for her to out-wrestle her and wear her out. Now, that is a tough task here, but I think she could possibly frustrate Julianna Pena on the ground, lock in some submissions, gain ground control, and which that could help her get wow the judges and possibly help her cruise to a decision victory. Is she the most exciting women's fighter in the UFC? I don't think so. I think that fight with Mayra Silva in the co-main event of UFC 297 this year spoke volumes. But as I digress, look, if you're there to win. Getting viewership and wowing the fans is a different thing. Your number one thing you should do is get a victory, no matter what, if you're a combat fighter. But yes, I do believe, whether it's boring or not, that's what she should do to defeat Julianna Pena. Next game plan, I think it's very important for Raquel Pennington to stay very patient in this fight. Wait for opportunities to come to her and wait for opportunities to open up in this fight. Because normally, if she lets the fight come to her she lets the fight come to her before she gets going. And if she makes some mistakes against Julianna Pena, a very dangerous striker, that could be a bad night in the office for her, and she could possibly be on the be on the bad side of being knocked out, I should say. And I think if she can make several mistakes, that could be her downfall in the fight. But last but not least, Raquel Pennington should go to the striking department. Now, I said the same thing about Julianna Pena, but if you watch Raquel Pennington, she's not the best striker, but she does have that boxing background. When she did do boxing first before taking the route to her MMA career, She does that. When she is striking, she is a good, pretty accurate fighter when the fight is in range. When the fighter's in range of her, and she's pretty accurate landing on her strikes. And when she's in range, firing back on her opponents, landing strikes, I think that's her big way of being in control of the fight. So I think that's a good game plan for her. Those are the following game plans I have for these respective women to follow. But with that being said, I'm going to go with Raquel Pennington to win this fight by decision to successfully retain her bantamweight championship in the co-main event of UFC 307 against Julianna Pena. Now, I just believe that Julianna Pena's wrestling background will be the reason why she wins this fight. Is she the most exciting women's fighter? No. And like I said, her co-main event fight in the co-main event of UFC 297 spoke volumes. She won in a boring, decisive fashion. But it doesn't matter. You're there to win fights. So I think as she goes to that wrestling background, takes Julianna Pena to the ground, having ground control, having success on in the ground department, gaining ground control, and possibly trying to frustrate Julianna Pena on the ground, trying to force a submission victory, could be the reason why she wins this fight. And I also think, as good of a fighter as Julianna Pena is, a former bantamweight champion in her own right, with her big underdog victory against Amanda Nunes in late 2021, having 26 months off from the UFC, being inactive for that amount of time is going to be her downfall in this fight. No matter how good you are, inactivity always plays a factor in combat sports. And I think that's going to be a reason why she is not going to be able to defeat a red-hot Raquel Pennington, who is at the peak of her career right now. I just think that Raquel Pennington is going to win this fight by decision in the co-main event of UFC 307. But that is my fight prediction for these respective women heading into the co-main event of UFC 307.